To think that we're going to be out of this before well into 2022 strikes me as at least, on the optimistic side, if not wildly optimistic.
It's a very deep recession, and it's going to take us a long time. Many countries will struggle, especially the developing countries. Not all is lost, but it's not a perfect world. We are in a perfect storm. We have to have global cooperation.
The first thing that strikes me as a businessman and really looking at it from the ground up is that we better be prepared for a long one. And we really must remain very flexible, resilient, and adaptable as we go through this.
If you take the 30 largest global economies, only 14 of them are in recovery mode. That is, they're on a path where the virus is more or less under control and opening up and doing this sort of, day by day, difficult management process of making slow and steady progress in both reducing the magnitude of the contraction and controlling the virus. There really isn't a V-shaped recovery. The only cases that would approximate that are the ones that got on it early, and you can count them on the fingers of one hand, or in the China case, because the virus control program was so large and comprehensive and aggressive, and so heavily supported with digital tools that there was a remarkably quick transition from essentially lockdown to a recovery path. Everybody else's path looks slower and more difficult for the obvious reasons that the lockdowns have been less stringent, came later. Significant economies are actually improving, albeit slowly, in the context of reasonable containment of the virus. These economic hits are very, very large and will leave residual damage sort of all over the economy. We're in for a slow and probably slower than the kind of majority view out there, whatever that is, recovery with a very difficult tail at the end, because there are certain sectors that are really hard to open. Anything involving very large groups of people.
We are in for, I think, at least 2 to 4 years, depending on how sharp you come down and how quickly you're able to do smart containment and so on. The short-term policies that a country takes, the leadership, the ability to communicate, the ability to do good tracing, containment, and so on, has a big bearing on the relief stage and the recovery stage, and how much harm is done to households, to firms, to the financial sector. I think multilateral cooperation or global cooperation is a necessity, because this is the nature of the problem we are facing is global. And you want to be able to start opening up, not just in your country, but opening up between each other as well. We are maybe suffering from the lack of very strong multilateral organizations that can lead the way, and then everybody follows. It has to be what I call a coalition of the willing. But in the medium term, how do we address the increased protectionism and breakdown of value chain, and what is the global value chain going to look like? That's a much bigger, longer term issue, and I think this is a big issue, because we know that especially for East Asia, trade and openness has been the way development has happened in our part of the world, and that's also should be the way other regions experience it. And at the same time, the coalition of the willing to make sure that the multilateral WTO rules of the trade continues to prevail, to prevent the bilateral tensions that we know between the two largest countries. The only way is actually to address it multilaterally.
We really have a very strong need now to really reconceptualize and think through a new form of multilateralism that will be able to carry us through in the post-COVID world. With the impact of technology and all the other issues on sustainability and income inequality rolled in, and especially addressing a world in which we have to really deal with this issue of pandemics. I think how we actually look at this from a business standpoint large businesses, small businesses from around the world, is really how we can actually develop a form of cooperation, maybe global supply chains or other forms that will be governed by new rules on trade and so on, and pragmatic way of coming up with a way of addressing some of the issues that we need to deal with.
Countries are actually competing. It's not firms anymore that are competing. It's countries competing and say, okay, I want to make sure I can produce my own medicine. I can produce my own medical supplies, my own food. Diversification is the answer. And the international coordination and cooperation is even more key here. To make sure that you don't have these kind of policies that distort unnecessarily these decisions. To be real, politically, a lot of countries will still be looking inward and undertaking protectionist policies. But it needs to be shown that it actually hurts your country and your people more, because you end up paying higher prices.
I think as a businessman and a global trader, what I can say is this trend of reshoring is going to happen. In fact, it has always been the case. Things to do with security, defense has always been domestic, right? Has always been nationalistic and country oriented. What the pandemic has done is expanded the scope of that, into what could be classified as essential products, that must be done nationally, PPE, for example. And then another set that could actually be non-essential, that in my mind, that may even need to be even more globalized, because you're trying to create efficiencies on a global basis and create resilient supply chains that will ensure long-term efficient supplies of those non-essential products.
This pandemic has accelerated, amplified trends all over the place, including especially the digital ones. My view is some sectors will rapidly increase the pace of digital adoption, new business models that are kind of hybrids, some of which were underway, and omni-channel characteristics will come into play, and others will be, seem like they're new because it was going more slowly.
We're going to actually emerge in a world that is going to be much more technologically driven and more digitalized than we've ever seen before. And this may, in fact, be the opportunity for us to actually think about using that as the basis to actually right some of the inequalities, for the less developed countries to play catch-up ball on the use of technology. And this is really what the AGI is all about, our opportunity to convene speakers like Marie and Mike to really address these global issues with you at this crucial time. We've raised so many questions. This will be room for future Global Thinkers series. Thank you very much to all of you.